Thank you, everyone, for the lovely comments already and for the support. I think let's get started, and people will probably come in a couple minutes, but I think it's good to get started. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Aidan McKee. I'm a co-founding member of the DBSA Associate Board, and I'll be the moderator tonight. I'll introduce you to the panel shortly, but first, I want to say thank you so much for joining us for this DBSA and brainstorm conversation. Um, we have people tuning in from 38 states, Puerto Rico, Australia, and Canada, which is very exciting. And as a reminder, DBSA stands for Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. DBSA provides hope, help, support, and education um, to improve the lives of people who have mood disorders. Each year, the organization reaches millions of people through peer-led support groups, education and advocacy, and many other initiatives. Tonight, our goal is to take the stories from the film and dive deeper into the storytellers behind the film. As a reminder, Brainstorm follows six individuals living across the bipolar spectrum. For those who have not seen it, one of the main themes is that recovery is possible even when it is not linear. I've been living with bipolar type 2 disorder for the past 10 years, so it's definitely an honor to be part of this discussion. And tonight we have lots of wonderful people joining, and then, of course, the panelists who I will introduce to you. So, with us tonight, we have Sara Schley. She lives with bipolar type 2. She's the author of BrainStorm, From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum, the inspiration for the film Brainstorm. She is co-writer, co-producer, and a character in the film. We also have Bonnie. Bonnie is a director, producer, and writer who has been involved in numerous PBS science series and has produced exhibit media for museums around the US. She is the award-winning senior producer and writer of the one-hour PBS international broadcast documentary Earth Emergency, narrated by Richard Gere. Um, Dr. Andrea Vasilev is a clinician, researcher, and advocate with nearly 30 years of lived experience of bipolar. She is the creator of the Overcoming Self-Stigma in Bipolar Disorder program and the author of the upcoming book, Beyond the Bipolar Label. Dr. Vasilev aims to end the stigma surrounding the condition through global advocacy work, outreach, writing, and being an example of what's possible living with bipolar. So that is our panel. A couple housekeeping notes. We will have question and answers at the end. We'll also be monitoring the chat and questions. We may be able to take a couple questions per section, depending on time. And please be respectful in the chat. It's a supportive space, and you're welcome to share reflections connected to our questions. And then, lastly, a quick thank you to Hannah and Jessica, who are some of our other team members who have made this event possible tonight. So thank you to them as well. And just how the night is going to work. So we'll move through four themes. Each theme, each section begins with a short clip from the film, followed by some reflection and discussion. And then I will outline shortly just some resources from DBSA. And you can find more resources from DBSA on dbsaalliance.org. So if you hear about some of the, or if you listen and you hear some resources that you are interested in, then I definitely suggest that you go to the website. There's lots of great resources, and it's a very easy to navigate website, which is great. So with that, let's begin with the theme of wellness.
And we're not hearing it. Let's start over with
Yeah, let's try it. Let's try that again.
the sound.
Let's start over sharing, maximizing audio.
Hannah is our lovely tech assistant who's set up most of this. So
Here,
there we
come
go.
on, buddy, let's go. Let's go for a walk. I felt like I was in a tailspin spinning down to earth.
I couldn't close my eyes around people where I feel like they'll just disappear.
My thoughts were so sluggish. I couldn't come up with the right words.
I started spending money that I didn't have. I thought I was the smartest person in the world. I mean, I really believe that.
A full orchestra was playing in my head round the clock.
I would just come home and not want to live.
It's like rain itself almost, or like the color gray.
It's like being at the pit of a canyon with these hyenas, teeth bare, just ready to tear your flesh apart.
This giant boa constrictor snake would slither out of the woods, eyes blazing, tongue flickering.
And I looked around one day and realized my whole world had gone black.
Thank you, Hannah. So first, Sarah, I'm curious about what wellness means to you, or what it meant to you before your diagnosis, and what it means to you now.
Well, thank you, Aiden, and thanks, DBSA. Thanks, Jessica, out there. And I have to shout out to the McKee family because I was looking in the chat and it looks like there's about 100 McKees there. So go Team McKee. I would say around wellness, I was thinking about this, reflecting on this question, that before I had my diagnosis, I think partly a function of now what I would think about as my bipolarity and hypomania, and partly as a function of having been raised by a father who was a first generation immigrant, and his message to us was literally work, 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 think later. So there was like an exponential intensity of always going, right? So wellness to me would be fitness, would be, I would basically metaphorically run till I completely burned myself out on every end of the candle. Now we know that that's a recipe for disaster for bipolar. So if wellness before was for me would be like, running the marathon nonstop and then do it again. Now wellness for me is a much more balanced practice of integrating what I call PACS: physical, emotional, creative, spiritual, different practices for health and vitality. So that's my own personal sense of it. I think of it as like, if there's a scientist out there, mathematicians, like this used to be it, and now I call it homeostatic wisdom, like a homeostasis kind of energy around wellness.
Hmm.
Uh,
And I know Dr. Vasilov has some comments on this too, but what was the process for you, Sarah, of actually finding the right recipe for wellness? Like, how did you find that? What was the journey to actually find your daily recipe that makes you able to come on to a webinar in front of hundreds of people and
yeah.
talk?
Like, for example, right before this, take a nap, right? I feel like it is an ongoing practice, an evolution for me that I tweak every day. And I think the advantage may be, having a number of more uh, rotations around the planet. The older we get, the more practice we get. I tell my kids, she doesn't live with this, but having a sensitivity that each of us is like a Stradivarius violin. We have to learn how to tune our own instrument.
Hmm.
At one point, we were at a bipolar international conference earlier this fall, and I asked one of the presenters there, very famous Australian researcher named Dr. Michael Burke, how can we being those of us with bipolar, have so much energy, so much intensity, so much passion, so much creativity, and then on the other end also crash, with so much intensity? And he said, you have to think of yourself as a Jaguar, and the rest of us are a pickup truck. And I thought that was kind of a nice way to think about it, right? Jaguar, Stradivarius, violin. We have to learn our own instrument, I guess, is a way to trying to answer your question, Aiden. And respect, really have respect and honor our own instrument because each of us is different. But we know that that balance and that wellness practice is essential to our health.
I know I'm biased. I probably would prefer to have a Jaguar than a pickup truck. So, um,
Yeah.
so Dr. Vaselev, I know you have some thoughts on wellness, some studies. Do you want to share some of that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So personally and clinically, I feel that wellness is such a personal concept. It's very hard for me to say, well, this means you're well and this means you're well. It really has to be defined quite personally for each individual. And I encourage people also to consider wellness on a spectrum, right? You're never 100% well, 100% unwell. That's not really not a thing. But we're constantly moving in between, and that's where life takes place, right? Trying to move towards wellness. There's a very interesting study that DBSA and a colleague of mine, Dr. Emma Morton in Australia, again, conducted where they asked people with depression and bipolar, how do you define wellness? And they took this data and they sort of shook it down. It came down to about 4 points. So the first one is the ability to act independently and according to my own will. That's the first one. The second, experiencing purpose in my life. The third, getting through the day. And the fourth, contentment. So everybody think about that for a second, if those resonate with you. But I just want to point out here, notice what's not on this list. Absence of symptoms is not on this list of what most people living with the mood disorder felt wellness meant. And I think that that's so powerful because I see a lot of people, clients, friends, peers who feel terrible because they have symptoms. And I got news for you. Most people have some kind of ongoing symptom, never 100% well. And that might sound discouraging, but it's also kind of liberating because once you accept that, you can build wellness that is truly meaningful and stop striving for this perfection of no symptoms.
hmm And Bonnie, so you do not live with bipolar disorder. Will you just give maybe a quick intro to people on how you got started with Brainstorm, how you met Sarah? I think you have a unique angle on this because wellness to you, I'm sure has changed throughout this like film experience. So I guess first, how did you get involved? And then second, what does wellness mean to you now? Has anything changed in your own wellness, even though you don't live with bipolar?
Yeah, thanks, Aiden. That's a great question. So I came to this project through Sarah, who I've known for many, many decades. We actually went to college together, but knew each other even before college. So we go way back. But I did not know what she was suffering through those years when she was experiencing bipolar without a diagnosis. I didn't know because we lived in different parts of the state and I didn't see her that frequently. And I didn't know till she gave me a galley of her memoir and I read it and I was like, wow, I cannot believe you went through this and I had no idea and I didn't even know anything about this. I really wasn't familiar with bipolar disorder until I read her book. And as a filmmaker, I thought, wow, this is a story that hasn't been told. I mean, I know there are a lot of biopics out there, people like Stephen Fry and Selena Gomez, but there really hasn't been, as far as I've seen, a really comprehensive film that talks about the science and stories of people with lived experience. And so when she approached me and said, hey, let's make a film, I want to educate the world about this, I was like, okay, well, if we can raise the money, I think it'd be a great idea. And so we got started and we were really lucky that we raised money to be able to do it. So that's how it evolved. And I did learn a lot from Sarah about wellness because the little secret is that all the practices for a bipolar brain are also good for any brain. So what I learned along the way from Sarah and from a lot of our experts is that things like getting good sleep is so important, and exercise and meditation and yoga and various practices that Sarah's very, very disciplined about have really rubbed off on me too. So it was really great learning all this firsthand through.
I love that. I love how you put that, Bonnie. That's good for a regular brain, but the stakes are higher in bipolar, right?
Yeah.
Probably, yes. So yeah, I feel like my idea of wellness has evolved through learning what I've learned throughout this project.
A personal example for me. So I'm married to my wonderful wife, Kia, and I think I'll get brownie points for bringing her up. But she, after the film, it all kind of clicked of like, oh, this is why you do so many things each day around wellness. This is why, you need to make sure that you're kind of like maybe more of a well-oiled machine than other people because there's just more to think about. There's more to consider. I know that I'm frequently thinking about how am I feeling today versus how was I feeling yesterday? What are the things that I've done differently today versus yesterday if today is a better day? And I think I know beyond just my wife, I think that's something that people have picked up on just generally that it does require maybe a little bit extra work, but also that extra work is just good for anybody. So, even if you don't have bipolar disorder, I think that there's a lot that you can learn around taking care of yourself and putting together a routine that works for you, doesn't have to work for everybody. So I think that's definitely something that comes up often. And just quickly, I want to know a couple of the questions in the chat. So, Dr. Vasila, do you mind repeating the four parts of wellness? I think that's a
Sure.
really great call out.
I did put them in the chat if you
Oh, you
want to
did?
see.
Okay.
Yeah, no, but no problem. But it's important. I just want to remind people this is just data that was gathered from this group of people. It was a lot of people, but I'm not prescribing this in any way, right? This
Mhm.
is what a lot of people with bipolar and depression felt were the aspects that defined wellness. So the ability to act independently or according to my own will, experiencing purpose in my life, getting through the day, and contentment. And they said, if I've got these, that makes up a lot of wellness for me.
Mhm.
Maybe
Okay.
we could invite people with lived experience to just put theirs in the chat because I have a feeling there are as many as there are people with bipolar
Yep.
probably have their own definitions. And I think one of my definition of wellness here would be to honor whatever yours is. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
If you needed to take a 20-minute power nap at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, figure out a way to do it. If you need to eat a certain way, if you need to and then advocate for yourself. I mean, luckily, Kia, you mentioned is like she's getting it now, right, Aiden? I think
Mhm.
it's important for our partners and our colleagues, to the best of our ability. Not everyone has the privilege of this, but to try to, create environments where we're supported by our colleagues and friends and family to do what we need to do to stay healthy. Because if we are, then we're going to be really productive. We're going to be more productive than most
True.
people. Yeah.
That's very true. So you mentioned, I think that there's like, I'm in the workforce. I have to,
Sorry,
oh,
I'm
no, no,
laughing at
no, go
Lucas.
ahead.
I'm just laughing at Lucas's comment
Oh, okay.
as,
Um,
as a boomer.
so like, I guess talking about wellness, like, how would you talk to your boss or if you need to, let's say you need to communicate that wellness is very important to you. I'm sure there's some people that are younger. They might be like entering the workforce. They might have to talk to their bosses about bipolar or taking care of someone with bipolar. Do any of you have any experience or any thoughts around like, how can you communicate wellness effectively or what you need for wellness?
I think that it's important for people to remember that they don't have to justify their needs all the time, right? When we have needs that are different from other people's, we sometimes think, oh my gosh, I have to justify this. I have to explain. You don't always need to explain. Sometimes it's okay just to say, here's the thing I need and go from there, whatever negotiations need to happen.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think making it into a conversation, um, understanding that maybe not everybody fully grasps what it
Right.
takes until they, of course, watch the film, then they'll know everything. But really, like having a conversation and taking the time to describe it and work through that. So I want to make sure that we get to the other sections as well. So we have throughout the night, we just talked about wellness. We're going to focus on community, advocacy, and hope. Those would be the four sections. And then, like I said before, we're going to do a audience Q&A, and then we'll do some closing statements. So next, I want to focus on community. But before I do that, so DBSA resources, as I mentioned, they're on DBSA alliance.org. And for wellness specifically, there are a couple resources that I want to call out. So first, there's the Wellness Toolbox. There's also mood tracking resources. There are various educational webinars. I see that there are a lot of different questions that are being sent in the chat around wellness. Some of those might actually be able to be answered by going to DBSA. They have a lot of great different content. And then the last one is also resources for newly diagnosed individuals. Personally, when I was going through trying to get diagnosed, trying to understand basically, what's wrong with me, like who am I never really looked at DBSA. I didn't know that it existed, but I remember my sister really helped with, I think she may have found DBSA and used it as a resource to help me. So I would say that it's a wonderful site. I'll be talking about it all night long. And for this specifically, I just want to call it the Wellness Toolbox, the mood tracking resources, educational webinars, and then resources for newly diagnosed individuals. I would say in the wellness realm, those are all really great resources. So I think with that, questions that I did not get to, we'll try and get to at the end of the night. But I do want to move on to community. So Hannah, if you don't mind. Perfect. Thank you.
The first year of Hudson's life was, it was just pure, utter hell. Do you know the scene in Hitchcock's Birds? It's like out of nowhere, this like black swarm just emerged. That's kind of how it felt to me. And I would just be on the sofa paralyzed. It was like, oh my God, I can't move. The things that were happening in my head had literally never happened before. For me, it was like a committee and there was arguments and we couldn't get on the same page about anything. I really thought I was absolutely losing my mind. I felt completely out of control of my physical person, like I had been abducted, and it looked like me, and it acted like me, and it talked like me, but it was like a full-blown takeover. Oh, you want to just suck on it? He was probably a week old or 10 days old, and I had a fifth of vodka. I'd lost 5 years of sobriety, and I'm in the basement, not wanting anything to do with my son. Just like keep him away from me. Oh my God. I was having a lot of suicidal ideation. Things got really dark. That'd be so cool. Literally, like if you would listen for 2 seconds, I would tell you I was not okay. I was telling people at the grocery store, I literally was telling everybody, there's something wrong with me.
So what I really love about that clip specifically is the focus on what happens when there's an absence of community. And once again, I think with DBSA, there's a built-in community that if you need it before you maybe create your own, for example, my community is my friends, it's my family, it's neighbors, it's my best friend at CVS, who's now my pharmacist, right? Not actually, but I do visit them a lot. It's really like everybody around you, but sometimes you start and you don't have any community. And that's where resources like DBSA or NAMI or any other mental health resources are really important. So I want to first call out that, and that's very important. And then I'm curious, Bonnie, joining this community of people with bipolar, advocates, what did you learn? What was it like to start learning? Was it scary to think that you were going to make a film that about something that maybe you didn't know a ton about yet, or what was that experience like?
Yeah, that's a interesting. So, yeah, I mean, luckily I had Sarah. Sarah and I were doing this together, so I don't think I ever would have tried doing this without someone with lived experience. So that was really important to have us, be a team. But I did come to this community as a filmmaker, not a person with lived experience. So I was kind of on the outside looking in. But Sarah and I spent the first year doing research, pre-production. We talked to about 50 plus experts in the field of bipolar research and clinical work and any kind of bipolar expert there was to get the stories and figure out what we were going to film. And I have to say I've never met a nicer community of people. Like they are just the most generous, wonderful, kind, thoughtful, smart people, scientists. And I've talked to a lot of scientists throughout my career because I've made a lot of science films. And these people were really standouts. I mean, they're so lovely. So that was my first sort of, experience. And then as I started meeting the people that we were interviewing for the film, the people with lived experience, again, I was like, wow, these are amazing people. They were also so kind and articulate and brilliant, really. So it was just a wonderful experience all around. I was just I love this community. I love meeting all the people I've met. And, I do really hope I stay in touch with a lot of them. And in terms of, the importance of community, I know that, the importance of community overall for one's mental health is really important, but I do have a greater appreciation for how important it is for those with bipolar. And I do wish we could have told more about that in the film. I know we touch on little things like we see Greg dancing with his dance community. That's really important to him. And we see Parker with his friends having pizza and playing games. And I wish we could have, filmed like a DBSA peer support group, but we just didn't have room, sadly, in the film to talk about everything we wanted. So I do appreciate the importance of community, and I feel lucky to have been pulled into this particular one. And I know Sarah has some thoughts about community.
Shall I continue, Aiden?
Of course, please.
Yeah, I mean, as Bonnie's speaking, I'm just reflecting kind of two levels of community. One is my local community, and I live outside of the city where community is kind of a thing. I live in a small rural town, and people tend to take care of each other. So there's built in, I have my singing group, and I have my writing group, I have my skiers, but I make a real effort to stay connected to those groups because it's really healing for me. And I don't know if it's because I'm an extrovert or because I have bipolar, that they both exist. But I find that having those structures built into my week are really important, usually one a day, sort of one a day. And like today, I'm out with my ski posse, whole bunch of old ladies skiing in the woods, So I think that's really important wherever your local community is, just, try to get connected to something that has meaning and joyful for you that has other people. The other thing, though, is that before I did this project, I did not know a single person outside of my family with bipolar, not one.
Wow.
Now I have a whole gang of buddies like Andrea and Aiden. And I would love to hear what you guys think, but there's some kind of camaraderie that when we're in a room, we know each other. Like we find each other, we know each other, we celebrate each other, and it's very healing. So I would encourage anybody, if you don't have any other bipolar buddies, whether it's DBSA has groups, right, guys, online or in person, there's something called a bipolar social club. You can look that up and be part of an E-list group of community. But I have found that it was just very invigorating and healing to be with people who understood my journey from the inside.
Yeah, to kind of echo what Sarah said, there's your regular community, and then there's the community of individuals with bipolar. And I think I didn't realize I needed the second one until I found it, right? One of those things. And I also just kind of want to meet people where they are. If making a new connection, making a new friend sounds overwhelming because leaving your house sounds overwhelming, because leaving the bed sounds overwhelming, I highly recommend online community, whether it's social media, Instagram, DBSA groups that are online, you can keep your camera off. You don't have to talk. You can just show up and be present and connect with people. So again, with this continuum idea, I want everybody to do something that they're comfortable doing, right? That isn't going to intimidate them, so they can build towards the sort of community that Sara and I are really blessed to have.
I want to just touch on one thing that you said, Dr. Vassilov, which is, and a comment from Donna in the chat, which is, so you want to join a community. Is it possible for it to ever not be scary the first time you open up? It's a world of unknown. It's, like how can you make that easier on yourself? Like I know that I had to take, I guess, like, bold steps to just say that I have bipolar and then to join a community. So, like, do you have any tips or tricks or, anything that just makes it a little bit easier to open up? Because, as people are pointing out in the chat, it is scary.
Yeah, I would say it's totally fine to show up small, right? That
Mhm.
means you don't have to say everything about you. You can just say, "Hey, my name's Andrea." That's all you're gonna hear from me today. That's fine. Start small. If you think about a ladder, you want to be at the top rung of the ladder. You can only get there by hitting each rung along the way. So it's totally
Mhm.
fine to start with what feels comfortable to you.
Yeah. Okay. And so what if, let's
And
say,
I want to say one thing, Aiden, because
oh,
I
please.
realize right now I'm speaking from at the moment of feeling well, where I'm
Yeah.
presently, thank God. And I'm speaking about things that I do to be proactive and preventive. But I know from reading some of the comments in the chat that when you're depressed, when I'm down, when this thing has me by the throat, then it's, like Andrew said, it's almost impossible to even turn the computer on. And so, I just want to honor the difficulty of doing what we're talking about doing in the midst of a bipolar depression.
Mhm.
And there, I think, again, just at least having at least one person in your life that you feel safe talking with is going to be really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the more reason kind of to do what you've done, Sara, and to build that community with intention. So when
Yeah.
you aren't feeling as well, it's already there for you.
Yeah.
And so I guess just going back to the making of the film, how did you know that you had the right six people to sort of develop that community within the film? Because I think they all play off of each other. There are so many wonderful elements about each person or the family behind each person, but I think they also work really well to tell different aspects of bipolar. So how were those six people
Hmm.
chosen? I know I filmed for a day and I got 5 seconds in the film, so because there's so many other wonderful people out there.
Sorry.
But really, like, how did you choose those six people specifically?
Um, Yeah, that's interesting. So it was quite a process. It really, and there was a lot of luck involved. So we started with Sara, of course, and when Sara approached me about the film, I said, we need to have other characters in it, to flesh it out. And so we had a few people in mind, like Heidi had emailed Sara after she heard her on a podcast. So we had her kind of on the list. And then I believe what happened pretty quickly was Devika Bhushan, Dr. Devika Bhushan, who was the acting Surgeon General of California at the time, came out with an op-ed piece in the LA Times saying, I'm the acting Surgeon General of California and I have bipolar disorder, which was huge. And she heard from a lot of people from that op-ed piece. And we immediately contacted her and had a Zoom with her and thought she would be a great character. And then she introduced us to Greg Martin, the military
Mhm.
general, and Molly Kawahara. So we found those two that way. And then
I
sorry,
also met Andrew that
Yeah,
way
I,
too.
I emailed Dr. Bouchon after that article. I sent that article to Greg, so she was really a point.
and then after filming the first main characters, I realized we really needed a young person in the film. It was all older people, not older people, but 30s and up. We really need a young person. And so through Elizabeth Arrico at the Children's Mental Health Resource Center, we found Parker.
Okay.
And so that kind of fleshed out, and we filmed with Heidi. So it's a lot of people, and I kind of thought, is it too many people? Because it's a lot of stories, but I do think they all work really well together, and
Yeah.
I'm pleased with how they all came together.
I think also being able to tell the depth of each one of those stories across six different people, um, also including you have researchers, you have family members. There's so many people that have some type of speaking role, and they are, giving something that's really helpful to the bipolar community. And all of that in 74 minutes is pretty impressive. So, once again, the film is a resource. I do want to touch on a couple more DBSA resources for this idea of community. And then we're going to look at advocacy. We might even do a little stretching break just because I think we're almost about halfway through. So first, some DBSA resources would be, as mentioned before, the peer support groups. There are also specific groups like parent and caregiver support groups. I know that's a huge population that could always benefit from resources. I think everyone that's in our lives are, they have to work just as hard in a way to help support and to, make sure that we all have the best lives that we can live. So that's a very helpful resource. Family and friends groups, there are local and virtual chapters, affinity and identity-based programming, and then the associate board, which I'm on, and other community involvement. So just again, a list of resources that are on the website. And with that, if we could go to advocacy and maybe take a little stretching break while you're watching it, that'd be great. Thank you, Hannah.
Necessarily, bipolar 1 has been the main focus of study of bipolar disorder. Unfortunately, the people farther down the spectrum are twice as common as the people out here at the end. So we've been missing this group of people for a long time.
Over the past few decades, a number of screening tools have been developed that can help accurately diagnose bipolarity. But most clinicians don't even know they exist. And getting access to those who do is challenging.
If there's one thing I could wish for is systematic screening for bipolar disorder in the settings where people are seen. And these are primary care settings, OBGYN offices.
It's really hard to get to see a psychiatrist nowadays. There are too few of them, and unfortunately, our numbers are decreasing, not increasing. So people are most likely to be seen by their primary care provider and diagnosed there and treated there.
So I think one important aspect of living with bipolar, and one of sometimes the hardest pieces, is being an advocate for yourself when you feel absolutely horrendous. And so the work of doctors, of public policy, of filmmakers, of, caregivers, I think this idea of advocacy doesn't have to be you don't need to necessarily be an advocate. If you're a support for someone, I think that you are acting as an advocate. I think if you are watching the film, if you're talking about it, like, I think there's a lot of different scales of being an advocate. And just talking about your story, it's like, for example, Dr. Vasilov, like, what encouraged you to share your story publicly? When did you feel the urge that, you felt it felt important to share with more than just maybe your internal circle?
In a word, spite.
Spite.
I like it.
Spite, followed closely by stigma. They're related. Let me explain. So there is so much stigma, and if you know me and my work, it's about stigma and self-stigma. And there is just so much of it. And I was diagnosed quite young. I was diagnosed at 14. So I never really experienced any self-stigma because, I was diagnosed so young. It was just always a part of my life. But that said, I saw it in other people. I saw it happening. I had a nurse say to me once at a, an orthopedist appointment or something, "Wow, that's a lot of medicine that you take." Really? Thank you. Did you have an alternative? Like what? Right? So it just became this thing where I wanted to show people that you could live with bipolar. And I have not always lived well. People seem to have this idea that I've got this like magical poster child existence. That's not the case, right? But that you can live well. Again, back to wellness, whatever that means for you. So sort of out of spite, I wanted people to know what it was like, and I wanted them to know what it could be like. So.
And Sarah, is that similar? Was it out of spite? Was it out of motivation? Was it out of like what led you to say, "Hey, Bonnie, I wrote this memoir. I would love for you to read it." That's an act of probably going out of your comfort zone, even if you love and you trust Bonnie.
Andrea and I have a very different trajectory because she was diagnosed at 14. I had my first episode at 21 and I wasn't diagnosed at 46. So I had 25 years of suffering. You know what it's like, anybody out there, immeasurable suffering with many good years too, but immeasurable suffering in there. And this was because I was consistently misdiagnosed with major depression because I would present with horrible depressions. That you've got depression, here's your SSRIs. And it wasn't until it was a doctor who was using Jim Phelps's BSDS, the bipolar scale, diagnostic scale, bipolar disorder, anyway, BDSD, I think it is, that was able to diagnose it in 15 minutes with the right questions. So it's like, oh my gosh, I have bipolar too. If we'd known this 25 years ago, can you imagine? If my mother had known it 50 years ago, can you imagine if my grandfather had known it? I'm like third generation at least. So we've been through a lot. And I was in a position at this point, it took me a long time because even then 46, it wasn't until I turned 60 that I wrote this memoir because I was still scared to tell anybody. And even when I wrote it, I wasn't going to send it because I still felt the stigma. I didn't know about Andrea's program yet. But so why eventually that I finally said, okay, it's worth doing is, I think, perfect storm of good reasons. But one was the pandemic that people were dropping like flies. And it just seemed like this mental health tsunami. And it felt like it was time to tell my story. And my editor who said to me, okay, you don't want to tell your story. Here's your last assignment. Go home and write this essay. I'm bipolar and a better person because of it. And I read it, I wrote it, and it was 3 pages. And at this point, I was like, okay, you're right. I'm going to do this thing. So then at that point, once I was out, I was out. And, if I'm going to be out, I might as well shout from the rooftops because millions of people wouldn't have this 20 years of suffering or generations of suffering. And that was then when Bonnie Walsh comes into the story because she's this brilliant filmmaker. She's, on PBS. Hey, can we do this? Can we get the bipolar spectrum story on PBS? And so it went because I think any of us out here who are activists or advocates, I'm looking at the chat, we know that if we can help one person not suffer, if we can mitigate one family suffering, that's holy, right? So if we can take that and multiply it times a million, wow. So that was why I did it.
So I think there's a common theme of the importance of getting a diagnosis. For me, it took a lot shorter of a time frame than it does for the majority of people. I think it was an absolute horrendous couple of years, but I got the diagnosis, and believe it or not, 2 years is a pretty good time frame to get that diagnosis from when you start, not doing very well. So what does it mean? I guess, Dr. Vasileva, I think 2 questions. One, just backing up a little bit, what is the definition for you of stigma? Because I think it's a word that's thrown around a lot, but it's maybe thrown around and maybe not defined. And then the second question would be, what did it mean to you, or what do you think it means to actually get the diagnosis? How does that help with recovery? I see a lot of comments in the chat right now about how do I sort of get my kids or my loved one on the road to recovery? And I think the right diagnosis can really help. So if you can just kind of comment on a couple of those things, that'd be really helpful.
Sure. So stigma is something that you're right. It's a buzzword. People love throwing it around. It refers to the negative beliefs held about a group of people or an individual because they belong to a specific group, right? It's
Hmm.
generalized and it's negative. So self-stigma, which, it's about yourself, refers to the negative beliefs you hold about yourself due to your membership in a specific group, in this case, having bipolar, right? So you think,
Hmm.
wow, I have bipolar, I'm so unreliable, and I will spare you my dissertation on self-stigma in bipolar for another time. But you're right, it's a buzzword and it does deserve to be defined. And speaking of, moving towards wellness, starting with a diagnosis, that is such a fundamental place to start. But at the same time, it can kind of fracture someone's sense of wellness if they've got this feeling about the word bipolar and what that means for them and what that says about them. So that's where some of this self-stigma work comes in that I do. And it's so important because if you can't live with your diagnosis, how can you live well with your diagnosis?
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And Sarah, when you found your diagnosis, like, were there a couple of major moments or milestones when you felt like, okay, I'm now on the road to getting the right diagnosis? Obviously, in very simplified terms, SSRIs can make things worse. Like, you are given medication, and this is not advice or any medical, I'm not a doctor, all that jargon, but it, like, if SSRIs are making you worse for whatever reason, and it's, maybe in some cases it's not great for if you have bipolar disorder, how do you go from being prescribed SSRIs, noticing you're getting worse, and then what are those milestones that might help you actually get the diagnosis that could really help or be right? Like, was there a couple moments that shifted, I guess, your path to getting a
Yeah.
diagnosis?
Well, I mentioned the diagnostic scale that my psychiatrist used, and it was dramatic because after 25 years, it took him 20 minutes and 5 questions. And it meant
Mhm.
knowing, it meant having the mental model of the lens on the part of the practitioner, the clinician, to know that, to ask these questions, to know that bipolar exists on a spectrum, that you might see bipolar without extreme mania. You might have
Mhm.
subthreshold mania. You might have someone who's really depressed that actually has a form of bipolar depression. The questions were pretty simple. It was, do you have family history? Yes. Um, have you had multiple experiences of depression? Yes. When you were given an SSRI, an antidepressant, did it make you worse or trigger mania? Well, yeah, as a matter of fact. And I can't remember the fourth one at this moment, as I'm telling you, but it was basically like four things. Family history was one, right?
Mhm.
And he just put those together, check, 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 and said, "We know what you have."
Mhm.
And he's described it as bipolar type 2. I was really skeptical. I was really angry. I didn't believe any practitioner because he was my fifth psychiatrist. I was kind of like, yeah, show me. But I was really desperate. And he kept saying, we know what you have, stay the course. And so I was prescribed for the first time mood stabilizers, in this case, lamotrigine. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not prescribing for anyone here, but moving to a mood stabilizer, as Dr. Holly Swartz would say, bipolar specific medications made all the difference for me. It took 3 months, but a light switch flipped from off to on. It was
Mhm.
very dramatic to me. It was like, black and white to color in The Wizard of Oz. And I have stories about that in the book and whatnot. But so it became very clear that the treatment that I had was working. Therefore, the diagnosis made sense. Therefore, I
Mhm.
was really willing to own it and grateful. I still wasn't telling anybody, but out of fear. But I was grateful that I had the right diagnosis and I was getting the right treatment, and it was working.
And so, kind of on the flip side, so Bonnie, when you sat down with Sarah, you guys decided to make a film. Was there a certain goal, or did you have a vision of, like, the advocacy work that you could do through this film? Like, was there an end goal in mind, or was it really getting the story out and seeing where it went from there?
Well,
Like,
we decided we had some main takeaways that we really wanted the film to get across, which you guys have been touching on all evening, which is that there can be bipolar without mania, and it's because of that it's often misdiagnosed, and that it exists on a spectrum.
mhm.
And help me out here, Sarah. What were other
I'm looking at it right now. You said a spectrum can exist without extreme mania, often misdiagnosed, and you can live well with this.
live well?
There's
So
hope.
of
Yeah.
our takeaways, we didn't want to make something that was too kind of prescriptive, or, we wanted to make a good film, not something that was like, you should do this, something like a PSA. We didn't want to make like a PSA kind of film. We wanted to make
Yeah.
a film that would be interesting to people, but get them, involved in advocacy work, make them want to become advocates.
Mhm.
So that was, and then we also had the mission to, save lives, mitigate suffering, create healing. So those were kind of our takeaways that we talked about in our mission. So we approached it that way, and we just found we were lucky to find these 6 incredibly articulate people to feature
Mhm.
their stories, and other people like Andrea and other, scientists. So yeah, I feel like we were pretty laser focused on those ideas, and a lot of great stories didn't make it into the film because of that. There's a lot of
Mhm.
great stuff that we filmed that we just couldn't fit in because we were trying to just stay focused, not overwhelm people with science, and
Mhm.
interesting.
And treatments. And
Yeah.
Andrea's wonderful support stigma, anti-stigma support group. I want to shout out to Bonnie Walsh, director in this, because it's a very difficult needle to thread around how do we create a film that is destigmatizing, shows hope, shows that people can live well. We're not the Hollywood, rendition of people with bipolar are crazy and are gonna, take their knife out, whatever. So how do we do the hopeful thing at the same time not be too Pollyanna? Not everybody's
Mhm.
doing well. Not everybody's going to do well. And I think Bonnie really worked super hard to thread that needle. And you guys are all, witness to the result. Um, so yeah, I think that was a pretty well done.
Editor Rachel Clark, who did a phenomenal job.
Yes.
Phenomenal editor who was also a writer along with us. So she really helped shape it too and structure it.
And I think it was, I mean, there's a scene at the end where Molly goes, she's like, yeah, I want this. I'll never give this up because who would I be without it? It's given me the greatest opportunities there
Mhm.
ever were. And then Heidi goes, I'm not that person. If that this would wave a magic wand and you could take it away, amen, hallelujah, you can have it. So, showing that diversity of that too.
And
Um,
I think we actually touch on that clip next. Before we
okay.
move on to the next section, I think there's a common thread around the question of what's the best way to get a person who is resistant to acknowledging their condition. Like they might not be an advocate for themselves because they may not think that they live with bipolar disorder. They may not want to get treatment. Dr. Vassiliev, like, have you found any, there's no magic bullet, but have you found any particular strategies that can help someone move that way?
So those are two different populations, right? Population of individuals who don't feel that they have bipolar. Maybe they're having acute symptoms, especially acute mania. You might be really unaware that something's going on, right? Um,
Mhm.
and then there's a population of individuals who knows they have bipolar, doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to necessarily reach out, get help, etc. Right? For that group of individuals, I think that exposure to people like Sara, like some of these advocates, is really, really helpful because you can
Mhm.
see, oh my gosh, you see yourself in that person. This is what my book's about. You see yourself, like you resonate with that person, and that connection is just so powerful. And think, well, if they're so cool, maybe I'm not so bad. Maybe I should get some help and see what I can make of my life.
Mhm.
So that's one group. For people who don't believe they have bipolar, that's a really tough nut to crack. Um, the best I've found is that at some point people will sort of bottom out, right? Sometimes you
Mhm.
have to hit rock bottom before you can start to climb up again, and that's so painful to watch if it's a loved one. But if you keep providing resources and you keep providing a safe space, and as soon as they show the slightest inclination to get help or to reach out, you're there with all the resources, right? Lead the horse to water and hope that they drink.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really helpful. So, with that, I want to just once again, DBSA, before we move on to the section of hope, DBSA has advocacy training and toolkits. So if you feel inspired by the film at any point, you can go to DBSA and find some of that. There's policy and different legislative engagements, mental health awareness campaigns, and then also if as a caregiver or as an individual, there are storytelling and lived experience opportunities. I really believe that if you are a caregiver and you've seen someone um, go through bipolar disorder, you also have lived experience. You can help others that are that have had to navigate it, and you can help with shortcuts, you can help with resources. So I think that's really important as well. So with that, let's go to
Aiden, can I just add
yeah,
one thing on the research?
please.
I'm noticing a bunch of parents in the chat asking, how do I help my kid? And maybe we'll
Yeah.
get to it more in the Q&A, but there is a wonderful, wonderful resource called the Children's Mental Health Resource Center. And maybe somebody could put in the chat. It's on our resource page.
Mhm.
She's the founder is in the film talking about kids. She says it's a childhood lost. They are just brilliant and compassionate and lovely and wonderful at helping parents navigate this whole thing, which is so difficult. So just shout out to them for
Yeah,
the
thank you for calling that out.
Melissa and others who are asking.
Perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
go ahead.
Yeah, Hannah, go ahead with the hope clip. This will be the last section.
If you asked me if I wanted to take this diagnosis away and that I could wipe the slate clean, it'd be done in an instant. Like in no way, shape, or form have I come to a place where I'm like, what a blessing in disguise. I'm not there. But I'm learning how to live with it.
I like to watch the sunrise, and I noticed that when I watch the sunrise, it's really grounding for me, and it's really beautiful too. Just because you understand something, it doesn't make it go away. I think it's always going to be hard for me to regulate my emotions. Bipolar is just what I have.
The filter that I'm so great at pulling off.
But I know more about it, which helps a lot. Every day that I do what I'm supposed to do, take my medicine, go to therapy, it just gets a little bit easier to manage.
I travel a lot because my family lives in India and used to live in the Philippines, so sometimes I still do become symptomatic, and I know to expect that.
I'm Dr. Devika Bhushan. I'm California's acting surgeon general, and I have bipolar disorder.
But I am who I am today because of having bipolar disorder. The people that I know who have bipolar disorder are some of the most joyful people that you'll ever meet, because we know what it's like to not be able to experience joy.
Welcome to Spread the Light with Dr. Devika B.
I wouldn't change my experiences, even though they were horrific to walk through. But it taught me true empathy for what it looks like when someone is really struggling.
All right, my turn.
Bipolar disorder and my experiences around it have made me a vastly better leader, friend, doctor, parent.
So I would just make a comment that I think it's possible to have this duality of there are some days when you might love your illness, and then there are some days when you wish it didn't exist at all. I mean, I think I will feel that sometimes. I think it's different for everybody, but there are, as you can see in the film, people have different experiences. It's not always something that you love. It's maybe not always something that you hate. Maybe it is. But I think it's just important to note that it can change for people. So you might have days when you are overwhelmed. You might have days when you're thankful, because it can make you feel, have a greater sense of empathy. So I think it's just, there's variance in maybe how people do feel around their relationship with bipolar. And I think for this hope section, Sarah, I would ask you, what would you say to someone who has just been diagnosed, or to a person supporting someone who has recently been diagnosed?
So, at the risk of sounding flippant, I've had a number of, moms my age come to me and say, "Well, I'm really, upset, distressed, horrified. My kid just got diagnosed with bipolar." And I say, "Congratulations." And I mean that. I said, "It's fantastic. It's so good that you have a diagnosis." My assumption is it's correct. If you have a diagnosis, that's the first step to getting treatment, and they can live well with this. It's a really good news. Now that's my experience because, again, it took me all those years. And when I finally got diagnosed, I got better. But I like to share that, flip the script sort of on it, because we do know that it's possible to live well, but only if we have this thing, only if we have the diagnosis, then we can treat it. Dr. Jim Phelps, who's in the movie, we saw some clips of him, and he was the guy who talked about the bipolar spectrum. And I asked him once why he was so dedicated. As a psychiatrist, did he have people in his family? Most people have some story with someone in their family. Said no, but why did you choose bipolarity? Because it was the one domain in psychiatry where he could really help people get better. And he could see it so like such a flip of a switch, and it was so gratifying. So I tell people, that's what I say. I say, good news. It's good news.
Dr. Vassalov, what about you?
So I like to meet that with, I guess, a combination of compassion, because I do understand the pain that can come along with the diagnosis, but also sort of echoing what Sarah said, that this is in some ways the beginning, right? Maybe it's the end of one thing, but the beginning of another. But more importantly, to remember that it is just a health condition, right? We talk about bipolar pride. Everybody has their own sense of bipolar pride. I'm personally with Heidi. I would take it away in a heartbeat. I feel I'd be no worse off for it. Um, but at the same time, I think true acceptance, true release comes from knowing that it is just a health condition, right?
Mhm.
Doesn't define you. If you can find silver linings in all of the nonsense, that's amazing. Do that. But just to remind people, what else is going on in your life? Tell them about the other things you are, right? The other things you
Mhm.
do, the other things you love.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's understanding that it's part of you. It doesn't have to be your whole identity. If you want it to be your whole identity, by all means, that's not a bad thing. But I do think that it's usually probably a little more advantageous to recognize that it's something that you can tame. You can still live a wonderful life. And I think, as Bonnie and Sarah pointed out, that's one of the intentions of the film, is to say, hey, you've been diagnosed, you're working through it, you find your community, there are, you find your wellness plan, you have advocates. And then, of course, I think in a way, it's almost a responsibility to then instill hope in other people, which is definitely, I think, while we're all on this call, it's definitely something that we value. And so for Bonnie, what was it like? I think you talked about this a little bit before, but just going back to the balance of like, how did you know when you had maybe um, the right hint of like hope, but then also, the reality is it can be very dark. And so like, how did you know? Who did you talk to? What was the feedback about like, okay, we've found the right amount of hope for this film while also still being realistic?
Yeah. It was a challenge. I mean, it took us a lot of work to get there. We were advised by various people not to be too Pollyanna about it. We wanted to be hopeful, but we didn't want to be everything's great, just find the right meds, because a lot of people really do still struggle to find the
Mhm.
right meds or even to get better. A lot of people are treatment resistant. It's not Pollyanna for everybody. So it was really important for us to be hopeful, but show that not everyone is just going to get better like that. That's why it was important to include Heidi's piece at the end that
Mhm.
take it away. I mean, she would trade it, she's not there yet to feel like, oh, it's a blessing. So that, we really wanted to walk that line, to offer hope. And I think the other way we do offer a lot of hope is by showing the practices you can do, by talking about social rhythm therapy and things like, in rhythms and getting sleep and eating well and exercising, all this stuff we talk about at the end. So that's another way we can offer hope, things that people can do for themselves. So I think it was just important to, show hope, but not just show everyone doing great at the end.
And Dr. Vasiliev, so with we kind of have these like subjective experiences, right? Like we want to tell people that it can get better. We have these stories. Is there, do you know in your research, is there proof that things for bipolar are improving? I think there's a question about, let's see, is there any research regarding the percentage of bipolar patients who are capable of holding down gainful employment? That's a very specific question.
I answered that question.
Oh, you did? Okay, great.
I gave some relevant statistics to that question.
Okay, perfect. That's awesome. Are there other I guess like adjacent types of statistics or just more of like, hopeful facts for people that are living with bipolar? Are we moving in the right direction research wise?
Well, yeah, I'd like to do a flip the script like Sara did because people say, oh my gosh, so many more people these days have bipolar. Things are getting so much worse. Our mental health is getting worse. And maybe in general, our mental health is getting worse. But let's be honest, I'm pretty sure the reason more people have bipolar is because we're doing a better job at finding them and helping.
It. Yeah.
Right? The number of people is the same. We're just seeing them more. So it looks like, statistically, like there's more. You see my point. So that alone to me is progress. That alone to me is reason for hope. Also, the phenomenal advancements in psychiatry, in psychology, of just ways to help people, right? We see so many more people living well. And I think one of the things that gives me the most hope is that not only are there more people living well, we see them living well. So less stigma means more power, means more hope.
Yeah, I really like that. So along the lines of that, once again, I think we're going to move into we'll move into audience Q&A, a more kind of question and answer period. But I think a couple last things on hope with DBSA. Once again, there are ongoing peer support groups. There are recovery meetings. So I don't think that treatment ever ends. It's a continual process. So the recovery meetings are really helpful. Personal stories, lived experience content, youth and young adult resources. There's also family and intergenerational support, and then continuity of care resources as well. So, I mean, I can't stress enough about how many resources there are out there, both with DBSA. There are plenty of books. There are plenty of short YouTube videos, long YouTube videos, TED Talks. Sara has a great TED Talk. So even beyond DBSA, I think that there are many resources that exist. So if you find something in DBSA, why not take that resource, copy the title, paste it into Google and see what else you can find. I think there are ways of finding resources from individuals that maybe don't have as big of platforms, but they really want to share their story. So I think, looking at blogs and just kind of looking all over for great resources, but obviously DBSA is centralized. So before we get into Q&A, I do want to ask Bonnie about the film and specifically, what would you have liked to do that you were not able to do in this film?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we filmed a lot of content and we had to leave a lot out, sadly. So, I mean, we filmed in-depth stories about treatments and approaches that we just didn't have room for. For example, we filmed a story with you, Aiden, about FitBP, a great treatment program at Mass General Brigham in Boston that we didn't get into this version. We filmed a great scene with Andrea and her Overcoming Stigma program. We filmed a story about a program called McPap for Mom, developed by Dr. Nancy Byatt here in Massachusetts, that trains OBGYNs to screen for bipolar and then offers support and consultation. But the good news is we're going to be making more films with the content we have. So we'll be focused in. We're going to make a film specifically about women and postpartum and menopause and bipolar next. And then we'll be making films about metabolic psychiatry, about treatments that will get into FitBD and Andrea's workshops and program. And, we have so many other topics. We want to make a film for families. So we've got a lot of things to do. We're going to be doing this for a little while yet.
I just want to thank Anu for saying, make Brainstorm 2, the sequel. But but we do have, I mean, just to echo what Bonnie just said, I'm really excited because there's so much good content. It's so important. I mean, for any perimenopausal women out there, there's a huge incidence of relapse. Nowhere is it in the literature. Nowhere is it in the practitioners. There's a data point, and Dr. Vasilev, that a psychologist in the UK, looked at 1,000 women of that age. Only 90% of them were not told by their doctor that there was a risk of relapse, and 60% had a relapse. I was one of those. So that's a really important story to tell, the postpartum issue, as Dr. Crystal Clark calls it, where the hormones meet the mood. And she's given us her permission to use that title. So we've got that one. We have the one with all the treatments, like Andrew's team and FetBD. We have others. And I really think it's important to do one for families, parents, spouses, and adult children as well. So yeah, we got to work that out.
And I think creating this, it's almost like an intro film, right? Like there are a lot of people that might be learning about bipolar for the first time. And that's, the whole point is to get people in the door, both as caregivers, both as an individual who might be living with bipolar. And I think, that's, I think you've really opened the door for a lot of people to learn more and to, to then go find people like Dr. Vasilev that give treatment, like, all these other wonderful people that are offering services that you may not know about, but it kind of opens the door to a lot of other stuff too. So, so with questions and answers, I am happy to either kind of look through and choose questions, or panelists, if there have been any questions that you have noted that you'd like to respond to, then please.
I see Ren asks, has anyone experienced when their dream job ended up being something that they could not do due to bipolar? How do you deal with that? I've had just shut the door on 2 separate careers. Turns out this is my dream job. Being a psychotherapist here in California is actually my dream job. So I guess that worked out. But it's devastating. I just want to acknowledge that and honor that. That is truly devastating. But I guess I also want to encourage you to have hope that something else fantastic, even if it's not your original dream, could come along, kind of like me in psychology.
Right. Yeah, true. I would like to respond to Gina's question about is medication enough? I would say the answer is pretty definitive no. I think it's necessary, but not sufficient. And I was given by a few different doctors, Supes and Swartz, this idea of 4 things, which I put in a diamond. So the 4 are medication, therapy, support networks, and then all your good personal practices, as we talked about before. I call PECs physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual. That's your diet, exercise, sleep, wake time, and bedtime are huge. So there's a lot that goes into managing the Stradivarius violins. But I think that, once you accept, somebody in the chat said, so there's no cure, it's ongoing. Yeah, but once you accept that that's the case and that these are the things you're going to do to stay well, like Bonnie said, good news, it's good for any brain and any body. So people will say to me, wait a minute, you're Medicare? You look too good for Medicare. Like, how is this happening? Well, because all the good practices that we do, that is going to keep us well. So yes, Gina, you got to do it all. And it's going to be a process and you're gonna have to get used to it, but it's going to make you a healthier person.
Are there any others that you guys would like to respond to? I want to keep the floor open because,
Yeah,
or even if
we
there are
talked about this a
comments that,
little. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
been trying to monitor the comments as we go, but there's been a lot of great questions in the comments. I'm sorry if I missed some of them.
Well, there's questions in the comments and
Right,
also
and
in
then
the
I see this
questions.
Q&A here. So the Q&A from the parent's perspective of an adult child that has been diagnosed with bipolar 1 with psychosis that does not believe that they have a mental health condition, how can you get them on the road to recovery? We touched on this a little, right? It depends what their reasoning is for not believing that they have a mental health condition. Are they so deep into that psychosis that they just don't see it? Is it a form of denial? Is it a form of self-stigma? Like, so it sort of depends what's going on. But again, I just want to acknowledge that that is a truly tough spot to be in. But again, if it's a stigma thing, showing them memoirs if they have bipolar 1 with psychosis, maybe Terry Cheney's memoir of bipolar 1 with psychosis, showing them the movie, just showing them that the other people, that they are not alone and they might be more open to talking about, at least having a conversation, that get them into a therapist who can, very few therapists specialize in bipolar and have bipolar. That's me. That's a small subset. But any good therapist that they connect with might be able to introduce them to this idea in a way that feels more palatable.
Yeah. There's also a question around um, the choice for portraying med adherence, or let's say med adherence is a major issue for. Can you at all speak to the decision to not address this in the film? I think it's an important question. I think personally, I was so focused on medication when I learned that I had bipolar. I was like, and we've talked about this number of times now around it's not just medication, it's, a plethora of ingredients that make you live a good life. But what was it like knowing that medication is such a big topic within the world of mental health? What was it like trying to get the right amount of conversation around medication, especially when you have all these different voices that some people may say, oh, medication is the key, and they could be a leading researcher. How did you balance those types of voices around treatments?
Well, for the film, I mean, we were telling the stories of these six particular people. And aside from Sarah saying that she was resistant to taking meds for a long time, everyone was very relieved to find the right meds and adhere to taking them. So it didn't really come up as a topic per se among the six characters. And again, it's all about making choices of what you can leave in and what you have to leave out. So it just, if one of our characters had been struggling with that, we would have talked about it probably, but no one really was in that position where they weren't taking their meds.
Okay, that's helpful.
I want to look at and maybe ask you, Andrew, as a psychologist, to address from the parent's perspective, an adult child that has been diagnosed with bipolar 1 with psychosis, so they don't believe they have a mental illness. How do you
Right.
get them on the road to recovery?
So I think, are we looking at the Q&A? I think that's the one we just did, or
Yeah,
another one.
that's from R. Johansson in the Q&A.
Yeah, so that's one where I said basically, is it because they're so deep in psychosis that they're not aware of what's happening? Is it a denial thing? Is it a
Oh, I
stigma
see. Yeah,
thing?
okay.
Right. But that is such, we've seen that question come up a couple of times in the chat, and that is, my heart goes out to these parents because that is such a hard spot to be in. If you're in
And I
California,
think,
I can help you.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead,
No,
sorry.
you go, Eddie. Go ahead.
No, please.
No, I was going to say was that I had the privilege of being on NPR yesterday, thanks to Andrea. I was on LA NPR. She couldn't do it. So she called me and said, do you want to do this? And the reason I'm mentioning it in this context is that there are a lot of questions from spouses, partners, people adjacent to the person I love who's having a bipolar episode is in complete denial. What do I do? And that's one thought I had was something that Bonnie and I learned when we were interviewing folks in the postpartum journey, that in the UK, and they had set up an agreement when the mom was well before this is a longer story, so I won't get into the whole long story. But basically, when she was well, she said, my spouse has permission to do XYZ, because they knew when she wasn't well that she would deny him. So
Right.
they made an agreement in the case of during the wellness period. And I wonder if there's people out there that do have a wellness period, if you can have that, make those kind of agreements so that it's even in writing, so that then when the loved one has the episode, you can kind of say, "Hey, remember we agreed to this." I don't know, Andrew, if that's anything you've tried
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, maybe I misread the question as well. When I read it, I thought this would
No,
be
that's
their
a different
first.
question. It was a different
Okay,
question.
sorry.
Yeah.
But it's true for parents too. This person who a question said, bipolar with psychosis, is this their first time? And so maybe that's a denial thing. If it's not their first rodeo, their first episode, then yeah, looking back at these wellness plans are so powerful. We just talked about this at a thing for DBSA yesterday. Being really specific, giving explicit permission for people to call your psychiatrist, take you to the hospital, what hospital you want to be taken to, et cetera, et cetera. Underlying all of this is the idea, the fact that in this condition, prevention is the name of the game.
Mm.
Yeah.
Once you're on the playing field, it's all about preventing the next thing, as opposed to constantly trying to follow up with the last thing and clean up the last thing.
That's a great point. I feel that strongly. It sounds like I see Sarah nodding. That's yeah. So I see that we only have about 6 or 7 more minutes, and I want to just make sure that I give everybody kind of if you want to say a couple last words, then we can get to a couple announcements, or if there's a question.
Aiden, can I say one thing? Because I know it's going to be frustrating and we don't get to all these questions, and there's so many good questions. There is a really good resource that both Andrew and I have participated in. It's an Ask Me Anything on Reddit. That is sponsored by a group out of Canada called Crest. Shout out to Canada. So in the Reddit Ask Me Anythings, there are now like 7 years of them, and there's like 600 questions that are addressed by a panel of 70 people. So there's probably your questions that are here, you're probably going to find in that Reddit Ask Me Anything if you go. It's on World Bipolar Day, right, Andrew? That's how they'd find it, I guess.
Yes, it is. And there's another one coming up, and it's on Reddit, but it is run by a very reputable
yes, exactly.
And it's all experts, people with experience, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, everybody.
70 panelists. So it's just stuff. Yeah. So if you didn't get to your question tonight, check that out because it's probably there.
The old archived, like is last year's archived?
Yeah.
They're all archived. Yep. There's like 7 years worth of them. And there's like
so it's Crest AMA.
At least 600 questions, and very high quality. Good yeah. Process. Okay. Go ahead, Aiden.
Well, that's perfect because we will be sending out an email with resources. Dr. Vasilov has a book coming out. There's obviously other resources out there. And we'll also add this, maybe a link to the Reddit if we can find it. That would might be helpful as well as a follow-up thank you email. Before I close and say thank you, Sarah and Bonnie, you do have a couple announcements, correct, around World Bipolar Day?
Yes. A lot of you have been asking how you can see the film again or tell other people you know about the film. And we are having our first global virtual screening that anyone from around the world can watch online on World Bipolar Day on March 30th. And we're doing it 3 different times. 7 a.m., this is all East Coast time, 7 a.m., 1 p.m., and 8 p.m. East Coast time. So we hit every time zone around the world. And each screening is going to be followed by a panel discussion. And so we're trying to get the word out. So we have, if Hannah, you could put our link to the website in the chat. There it is.
I just did it, yeah.
Then you can go to our website, which is really easy to remember, brainstormthefilm.com, and you can order your tickets, and we have them on a sliding scale, so anyone should be able to afford to come. And please spread the word to all your friends and family and colleagues and anyone you know who you think would benefit from seeing it.
Bonnie and I, being who we are, said, let's get 1 million viewers. So you can help us get 1 million viewers. We're really psyched about that. And we do have partners from around the world. We've got people in Hong Kong. We have people in the UK. We have people in Mexico. So we're working on that, trying to make it really global. Okay, Lisa said, can we access the chat later? I'm not sure about that.
That'd be good. A lot of good stuff in the chat.
But we will be mining the links, right? And putting them in a letter tomorrow, a follow-up letter, which will also have the panel, the recording of this conversation. I don't know if the recording includes the chat. Does anybody know? when you watch the recording? It may or may not. I don't know.
I don't believe it does, but that's for our tech
Oh,
whiz.
Hannah says no. Yeah, Hannah
Answer.
says no.
Save
Yeah.
the
But
chat.
again, she's saving all the links, so that's good.
Save chat just by clicking on those three dots at the bottom. You can save the whole chat if you want.
Oh, great. Perfect. Well, I'd like to close up. Is Dr. Vaselev or Sarah, Bonnie, any just kind of final words of hope for people? I know we just did a whole section on hope, but final sentence.
Well, my final sentence is actually a big thanks to DBSA, to Jessica, who's not on the line here, to you, Aiden, Andrea, and the DBSA community for being such incredible partners in hosting this evening, and really one of our first screenings of the whole film. And you guys have been fabulous. And I just wish that I had known about DBSA when I was suffering. I'm glad you're out there and grateful for all your support.
Can I read something that I think will be a nice ending?
Please.
So, stigma feeds on ignorance and misinformation. We are the antidote. We are the living, breathing truth this world so desperately needs. We are the message. Simply by being ourselves and living openly with bipolar, we chip away at the stigma surrounding it, one interaction at a time. When people meet us, they have the chance to expand their understanding of who those who carry the bipolar label truly are. What a precious gift to offer the world, Sarah and Bonnie, precious gift in this film. It's a radical act of service to ourselves, society, and everyone who will walk this path after us. Together, by showing up as we are, we can pave the way to a kinder, less stigmatized world.
Thank you. That's so nice.
Lovely.
Is it possible to copy and paste that into the chat?
Sure. That's
we
from
can
my
send it tomorrow.
That's from my book. Yeah.
Oh, it's from your book. Okay, never mind. Never mind. We're gonna send a follow-up email, like I said, with links. One of those links will be to the book. And yeah, there's a lot of great resources that we could not touch on, but we'll be adding to the thank you email. So I think that's everything we can do in 90 minutes, I believe. So thank you
I
so
gotta
much to
say, thanks
everyone.
for all the love in the chat, because we're really feeling it.
I was about to say,
I'm just
yeah.
feeling it. My heart is overflowing with gratitude and appreciate you guys. It's really, really, really delightful. Thank you.
And I think this is just the beginning. I think that this is now opening up more conversations, more opportunities, as you mentioned, World Bipolar Day. So I think a big thank you to Sarah and Bonnie and the whole BrainStorm team for putting so much effort into this. And I feel very blessed to be a part of this. So yeah, thank you to everyone in the chat, and thanks for everyone making this a wonderful evening.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Take
good
care.
care.
Night.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Wait, no, Aiden, don't go away. Come back.